Welcome back to Trending in Education. Mike Palmer here. Very pleased to be joined by Dr. Franklin D. Gilliam Jr., the Chancellor of the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Franklin, welcome to Trending in Education.
Hey, Mike. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and it's been a pretty hectic time to be responsible for a major university in North Carolina with an interesting mission, and I think there's plenty for us to discuss today. One of the ways we like to kick off the show typically is to get the origin story of our guests. What exactly got you to where you are now in your career? And since in some ways you really made it to the heights, I'm excited to hear from you, how you actually got there and any lessons learned along the way.
Well, this is one of those questions where you don't know exactly where to start.
Mm-hmm.
Raised in Canada until I was 11, a Midwesterner after that. Went to high school in suburban Minneapolis. George Floyd thing was particularly salient to me.
Yeah.
I went to college in the Midwest on a football scholarship. Played there for 4 years and decided I got my ribs broken when we were playing Colorado that taking the GREs was probably a better life course. And so I went directly to graduate school, and I had always been a political science major and started out on a career as an academic. My first academic job was on the faculty as an assistant professor at the University of Wisconsin in Madison.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was recruited by UCLA and stayed there for 29 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Ended up as the dean of the Luskin School for Public Policy.
Mm-hmm.
And from there came to North Carolina. Interestingly enough, I had never been in the state of North Carolina until I interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
I was interviewing for presidencies at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And an old high school friend who's an academic, actually we grew up in the same neighborhood and went to the same high school, sort of Facebooked me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I haven't seen you in a long time. I'm coming to Los Angeles on an NIH panel. Want to get a cup of coffee?" I said, "Sure, I haven't seen her in many, many years." And we're sitting around chatting, and she says, I'm telling her what I'm doing. I'm interviewing for these jobs. She says, "Oh, my school is looking for a new chancellor." And I'd only remembered her being at the University of Tennessee. And then she said, "What?" She says, "No, I'm in Greensboro, and I enjoyed it. I left Knoxville. And I'll put your name for it." And I said, sure, that's great.
Right.
I never thought about it again until I get a call from the search firm saying, "You've been nominated for Chancellor of UNC Greensboro."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Oh, okay, I guess." And so they invited me to come out. I came out, all under cloak and dagger to avoid, I guess, the open meetings stuff. And they had us in tents, having to drive into a tent and escort us with umbrellas. People could see us. I felt like I was interviewing for the NSA or the CIA or something. And then they invited me back, and I said, "Well, I've been flying all over country interviewing for these jobs." And I said, "Oh gosh, go all the way back to North Carolina. I just can't do it from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I'm just overflying." And they said, "No, they really want you to come back." I said, "I don't want to come back. It's too far." And they said, "Come on, So they convinced me to come back. So I came back, and then got a call from then President Tom Ross, who said, "We'd like you to be next chancellor of UNC Greensboro, the 11th chancellor, and you've got 24 hours to decide."
Wow.
And so, that's how I got here.
Yeah. Wow. That's and then the 11th too. I mean, there's some storied history to the university itself. Can you share a little bit of that as well?
It's 127 years old. Started as a women's college. It was that until the mid-1960s. It became coeducational. I think they did the first men in 65 or 66.
Okay.
It had always been known as the university where the smart girls went. And I'm led to believe that when they admitted men, the collective GPA dropped by 0.5% or something.
Yeah, yeah. Not to mention the distraction of having men on campus too.
Well,
So it's a double bad. Yeah, yeah.
but so the university's history and legacy had been that it had always provided opportunity and access to high level education for,
Hmm.
for people who didn't have that opportunity. To remember, during the first half of the 20th century and the late parts of the 21st century and the late parts of the 20th century,
Hmm.
women were not didn't couldn't go to
Right,
uh, to to state universities.
right, right.
In our case, at either Chapel Hill or North Carolina State, women at best could be day students. They could come and take some classes during the day, and then they
Got it.
had.
Yeah.
And so we were a residential camp
Hmm.
for women, and it was tip. And we actually as women could come and learn STEM disciplines. They could really
Yeah.
have opportunities that they might not have otherwise.
Right, right.
In fact, if you think of the movie and the book Hidden Figures,
Yes.
it was a women's college alum who was really the person who started that division
Mm.
because they'd been trained. And actually, when I've met a lot of the older alums, it's been interesting. They've been mathematicians and scientists, and they have worked for the intelligence agencies. So
Uh-huh.
it's been interesting.
Maybe that explains the interview process too, or
Yeah,
it's all
maybe.
tying it back.
I just think that was more North Carolina politics. Was anything. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, but that organizational history in some ways expanded, right? So I think originally it was predominantly white women, right? I mean, that was
not,
the
not predominant.
exclusively. Yeah,
Thank
yeah, yeah,
until
yeah. Uh,
1962, I think,
okay, yeah, and then 62 it opened up
to
beyond,
to 3 or 4 black women.
and then relatively soon after that it became co-ed.
Yes.
Got it. But those early, what may seem, retrograde, looking back on it, was sort of cutting edge, I guess, at the
Uh,
time in some ways.
yeah.
And then
In that
yeah, and then it does sound like there's been a continuation of that trend, that trajectory, really since the 60s, right on through today, where now, as someone who's been chancellor here for a little bit, how would how would you characterize the mission of UNC Greensboro today?
it's the same as it's always really been, and
Hmm.
that is to become a national model for how you blend access, excellence, and impact.
Hmm.
And that sounds a bit trite or cliche, uh,
Hmm.
but the popular narrative has been that access and excellence is a zero choice decision or game,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? If you have access, you somehow have to lower standards. And
Right.
we think we're able to demonstrate and have been able to demonstrate that you don't have to do that. Eliminated black white uh, outcome differences,
Yes.
nearly eliminated income based gaps in educational performance.
Yeah.
We are number one in the state for social mobility,
Hmm.
and we are, if not the most diverse and across all dimensions student body, then one of the top two in the North Carolina system of 17 schools. The
Yeah.
bottom line then is we take the widest array of students the
Yeah.
farthest,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We
And
get
it and
the
and
widest
also
the furthest.
yeah, and it sounds like there's a lot of intentionality to the metrics that you're looking at too, and they may be slightly counter to some of the metrics that other universities may measure themselves.
Well, the UNC system when Marcus Bellings became president actually instituted
Hmm.
metrics
Okay.
and what they call performance metrics.
Okay.
And you worked with the system to develop, but they gave you a choice. There's 9 of them or something. So, I mean, the
Yeah.
choice set was limited.
Yeah.
You could say these 5 we're going to sort of actively pursue, these 4 we're going to sort of hold pat on, up
Okay.
the reach and so on. So, for example, improving retention and graduation rates of low-income students,
Yeah.
enrolling larger numbers of rural students. It's been one of the learning experiences for me since I've
Hmm.
been here,
Hmm.
particularly coming from Los Angeles, is
Right.
recognizing that a lot of our students come from small towns. And
Right.
I don't know, I knew North Carolina had been big textile
Right.
based economy and so on. So I don't know, I thought it naively that it was like Cleveland or Detroit or someplace, and there were these big mills in a
Yeah.
couple towns and and didn't realize that in fact every little town had a mill of some sort.
Yeah.
And also I didn't realize that there was the agricultural sector was so big here with tobacco and cotton.
Sure. Sure.
So there are a lot of kids from a lot of small towns, many of them first in their family to go to college.
Hmm.
And so the legislature identified low income or rural students as benchmarks for us to improve access generally across all 17 campuses.
Right.
Interesting. So it's just the humble brag here is that we're the only school in the system to meet ours 2 years in a row and to meet all 9 this past year.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, we've hit them. And
Yeah.
so that's a real testament to our faculty and our staff
Hmm.
who have really brought passion to the intentions.
Yeah. And
And
is that how you would attribute it? I mean, you think there's like buy-in within
yeah,
the broader culture?
we are not what they call an R1 or Research 1 like UCLA was or
Right.
Wisconsin,
Right.
Chapel Hill or State. So we have paid attention historically to teaching.
Hmm.
I've been in fact, all my career, except till I came here, I had been in R1 flagships and
Yep.
where research was the currency of the realm
Right.
and
Right.
teaching was not.
Hmm.
And, I like to say our students come with native intelligence. They just don't come in many instances with the built-in advantages
Right.
the students come with.
Right.
And so our job is to coach them up and
Yeah.
speak. And I think we've done it intentionally. We created a new division of student success,
Hmm.
and it's state of the art student success commons right in the heart of campus. We've
Hmm.
made it part of the culture that students, when they need help, can go there. I think
Right.
at some institutions and you need help, heck, you can't find the professor half the time. When
Right.
I
Right.
say that, I say that from being one of those professors for many years,
Right. Right.
Dr. Hill myself.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but our faculty pride themselves on being in the classroom.
Hmm.
Now we're still doing, and in fact, increasingly being very research productive on our campus.
Sure.
Continue to engage in cutting edge research, but it's not the only thing that we
Right.
do.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of these metrics it's impressive. I guess it's good in and of itself to be pursuing them, but I think what's impressive and somewhat hopeful is that by being intentional about moving the needle on these metrics, you were able to do so, which would kind of indicate that other organizations and universities can follow your lead. And that's where I'd love to hear more about, some of the tactics that have worked. But then I also would love to maybe lean into the crazy year that 2020 has been. And as someone who's leading, a major university with a diverse student body and the mission that we just described, I'm sure you've had many a sleepless night since maybe March of this year, and I'd love to hear.
Mike,
Yeah.
I did not think this interview was going to end in you pouring salt into the wounds. Uh,
It's not ending. Hopefully it's just in the middle.
Might
We
have
saw.
to end
Yeah.
because you're going to hit a sore spot. I'm going to have heartburn. The whole thing.
Yeah.
Uh, so what we've really focused on, look, it's not that we don't know how to provide good education in this country. It's
Hmm.
not that we don't know what it looks like.
Hmm.
Cancer, there's no cure.
Right.
But education, we know. And many of our children, my own,
Hmm.
yours ultimately will.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to direct him to the right kind of schools. You're going to live in
Right.
it. but that's because you're going to have those choices.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't have those choices. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we know how to provide it.
Mm-hmm.
And so to some degree, we have to simulate what happens in good educational environments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of supports built around the student
Yep.
to help them.
Mm-hmm.
And in really affluent places, they just buy it. You buy
Right.
tutors, you buy
Right. Right.
specialists to do this, that, or the other thing.
Right. Right.
Schools that are well funded, they provide these and give strong counselors, strong
Yep.
college advising, all that sort of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
we try to essentially simulate that or recreate that environment, but do it at an institutional level
Mm-hmm.
so we can support our students. So, for example, we have peer mentorship program for freshman students, and they're led by trained graduate students. So we get a twofer.
Mm-hmm.
A graduate student and they mentor the freshman.
Mm-hmm.
And we're likely to have more in common with the freshmen than some, 40 or 50-year-old. We are scaling that up to offer it to more students. We have a training academy for people working, students and staff who work with our students, particularly our first and second year students.
Mm-hmm.
That's been, both of these things have been funded externally. We have philanthropic dollars to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have done a lot more in our traditional student affairs space to engage in high touch behavior with or practices, with the staff. And part of it, we have to touch these students. Some of it, they just don't know to ask. They don't know what to ask for. I'm going to tell you, affluent students know what to ask for.
Yeah. And they also feel entitled to ask for it as well.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And you can't make them feel like they're going to a remedial center.
Right. Right.
And that, like any other thing, you're going to get better.
Right.
Practice.
Right.
You've got folks who've been trained to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And once we kind of get them to see that path, to recreate some of those built-in advantages that a lot of other students come with, then they're fine.
Yeah.
They have the native intelligence.
Right. It brings me to a little bit of the diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity, and the idea that frequently, students of color may not feel that sense of belonging or connection to their university culture. And it seems like, UNC Greensboro is almost a counterexample to that.
I spent my whole educational experience being in environments where there were very few Black students, whether it was at any point in my life, from going to school in Canada, to going to school in suburban Minneapolis in the 70s, when there would be one Black family in each suburb. We all knew each other.
Right.
To going to a private university where, other than those guys on the football team or the basketball or track guys, there weren't a lot of Black students, to graduate school where I think we had two of us in our PhD program. Teaching at Wisconsin was one of the few African-American faculty to teaching at UCLA was better.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I'm getting at, Mike. We have about 23% African-American undergraduate students.
Yep.
So the feeling of isolation comes when you are a Black student, you're the only Black student in your class, and then you walk out of the class and all the students are going around and you don't see anybody who looks like you.
Yeah.
In our case, A, you might not be the only one in the class, but B, even if you are, when you walk out of that class, you see a bunch of people who look like you.
Yeah.
And so it reduces that sense of isolation and therefore alienation from the university community.
Yes.
And I don't know, I suspect there's some threshold number. I've not done any academic, but it has to be more than probably, 15% or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm just guessing here to sort of think through what it would take for a kid at a school to walk out of that classroom and see on the campus other people that look like them.
Right, right.
And I think it's true for Latinx students. I think it's true for Asian students. So college is hard enough. But think about it the other way, Mike. Every time you walked out of your class and onto your campus, you saw a whole bunch of people that look like you. Unless you're going to tell me you went to Howard or something, which I doubt, then I suspect that was your experience.
Right.
Psychological and emotional toll that takes on people. I think we're now just learning it.
Yes.
As a little bit of a segue to the protest and George Floyd murder. A lot of my white friends have come to me and said, and these are well-meaning, liberal, educated folks. I just do all this stuff I'm hearing, people coming forward with their stories. I just didn't know. How could I not know?
Yeah.
My friends were asking me, well, how come I didn't know this? And I've heard this over and over and over again. How is it like this? And because, right, two parts to this line of thinking. One, the George Floyd video was so visceral, and the inactivity of the other police, the intentionality of Chauvin, it was and then all the stories they've heard about blacks being, here's the second part of it. America's been gaslit on race since 1980. There's been a gaslighting of race. So what are the elements of it? How did that narrative start? In 80, during the early Reagan years, the concept of the race card was developed. So anytime anybody black said anything about race, the white response was, you're playing the race card. Meaning it was being, race was being invoked arbitrarily or
to get like an unfair advantage, I guess, is the idea,
So, but then it go down a whole list of things. Why are you so sensitive? Why do you talk about race all the time? How do you know it was racially motivated? The person just was in a bad mood, had a bad.
Why are you getting so emotional is a good one that's out there.
It's so emotional.
Right.
Okay. So what has happened as a response in the Black community is, particularly among the middle class, people just quit talking about their experience.
Yes.
Talk about them with each other, but wouldn't talk about them with white people.
Right.
And this is to the point about the emotional and intellectual toll it takes on people. Students, faculty, and staff. And so this suppression also comes with a cost. People are frustrated. If you've read Black in the Ivory or any of the Twitter accounts, that every story you have heard has happened to me at one point or another. I was stopped every year I came home from college, either at front of my parents' house, one time stopped in the driveway, another time stopped at the beginning of the street. I mean, and then just go down the list of every other microaggression you can imagine. And I asked my father, who played professional sports in the 50s, I said, Jesus, how did you possibly survive that? He said, well, I could have fought every day. He said, but, I was trying to get ahead, and so he said, but I always kept track of the transgressors. And if I ever got a chance to get even, I did.
Right.
Which is something I've taken to heart over these. But this is to say then, the students who are complaining about faculty mistreating them, I mean, my favorite, I had it happen many times when I was a young professor. I'd say something in a meeting, in a departmental meeting. Nobody would register it. 3 minutes later, a peer of mine, a white young professor, would say so I would sit there. This is a gaslighting. I would sit there and go, I'm looking at him. Didn't I
Yeah.
just say that?
Right.
Does anybody? And then I thought, well, God, maybe I didn't say it.
Right. Right.
It kept happening. That's the gaslighting. Even I
Sure.
believed I didn't say it when I said it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And as you know, the end game of gaslighting in the famous movie Gaslight was to
Hmm.
drive the person insane.
Right. Right.
And I've had two friends kill themselves who are academics
Mm. Wow. Yeah.
because it drove them insane.
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah.
and
But
so,
yeah, but I guess on a positive note, there are opportunities to sort of combat that feeling, that perception among your student body by, the tactics you're talking about, absolutely, the representation of your student body, 100%. But then also, I think there's the old adage, culture eats strategy for lunch.
yeah,
You could have the most lofty aspirations around moving the needle on these things, but if you don't actually have the buy-in up and down throughout your culture, you're not really going to get there.
yeah.
And thoughts on that?
Well, I think you did right. I mean, it was the first task I took on when I came here, which
Hmm.
was I believed I had to change the culture, not just for this issue, but
Yeah.
to really transform the university and to have it live to its full potential as an institution.
Hmm.
And people have had to buy into that, and
Hmm.
and that's been the hardest part of the job. Well,
Hmm.
that and learning Southern culture, which I grew up in the North. I've never sort of don't have any of
Right,
this.
right. You got Canada and Los Angeles are not the South. Yes,
Uh,
yes.
my don't have it in my DNA, so I've had some difficulties
Yeah.
because of my ignorance of the norms and mores. But
Hmm. Hmm.
um, changing the institutional culture was job one and is still job one.
Yeah.
It,
Especially in light of this year too, because the other aspect is COVID, right? So,
well,
you
and
know, the,
that's hard. I mean, because
yeah,
you don't know what it changes from week to week.
for sure.
I mean, you're talking about planning under extreme conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Exactly.
You have there are lots of layers to it. You've got not only your university, but we've got five, even in Greensboro, which is a relatively small town of a
Yeah.
3,000,
Right.
has five universities or colleges in it.
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
not just our campus, it's the others
Yeah.
as well. Many of the
Yeah.
students live with students from the other campuses
For sure.
uh,
Yep.
or live in proximity to them. So we've had to develop a county-wide, city-wide collaborative to try to
Hmm.
deal with some of this. You got to work with the county health agency. So they're
Hmm.
doing all the contact tracing and that sort of.
Yeah.
We've got to deal with the university system
Hmm.
that will make policy for all 17 campuses.
Right. Hmm.
That, that's hard to find that point of
Yeah.
equilibrium. Uh,
Hmm.
the data is that we're spiking here in North Carolina,
Yes.
which
Hmm.
I don't think any of us, and if you had asked me 3 weeks ago, and we'd
Right.
all been pretty steady. So our assumption was, you know what, this is probably in North Carolina going to be relatively flat. There'll be a few blips,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, because we hadn't looked like New York or
Sure.
any of those places. And then all of a sudden,
Hmm.
curves going in the wrong direction,
Yeah. Yeah.
where we start moving students back to campus, or they're allowed. So it's interesting. The sort of lengths, the gymnastics we have to go through.
Yeah.
We're having to stagger the move-in dates. They're allowed to
Hmm.
come in, drop their stuff off, but then they got to leave.
Yeah.
So it's not the typical, oh, you know how it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
the families are there because I
For
go to work
sure.
today and I help them move in. I chat
Right.
up families and do all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And we're all glommed in together and we're sweating and it's hot in
Yeah. Yeah.
North Carolina and we're carrying this stuff up. But to prevent that,
Yeah.
some drop their stuff off in staggered sessions, and,
Hmm.
then having them come back in waves.
Hmm.
So, but July 25th, we'll see The first, well, we've already seen some students move in, the RAs and the support.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Then August 10th will be the first wave of students who will move in, and then
Hmm.
instruction starts August 18th.
Right. Which is early, right? Like you pulled it forward.
We kept it the same.
Okay, got it.
Some
Yeah,
campuses in our system pulled it forward. Some are going back on the 10th, I think,
yeah,
and
yeah.
some actually have pushed it back until after Labor Day. I think
Right.
we showed it on that. So
Yeah.
everybody's sort of trying to game the curve.
Who knows?
Yeah, and we,
Although I did want to touch on the role of online learning in your sort of philosophy and the strategy there, because it did seem like you were in some ways a little bit ahead of the game in that you were again being intentional about the use of online and trying to grow that component in your delivery, and then COVID hit. So I think, unlike organizations and universities that might not have been
yeah.
prepped, it was difficult for everybody, but at least you were a little bit out ahead, right?
Yeah, that, and also for summer school, we'd always been primarily online.
Okay. Yep.
And so that transition so we put 99% of our courses up in 6 days.
Wow. Uh-huh.
And that was incredible. But we, again, that's another one of finding the sweet spot, of finding the point of equilibrium.
Right, right.
A lot of our students who are residential will take at least one online class over the course of a year.
Yeah.
And many will take more. So this hybrid model,
Mm-hmm.
the point is sort of what is the distribution between online and in-person.
Yeah.
Secondly, with the summer and the last spring, to really work on this, and we put in place a number of training opportunities for our faculty.
Yes.
And we've really, I think, improved the online delivery. The delivery, when you have 5 days to figure out how to take a class from face to online, but if you know you're going to go online and you've got a few minutes to work up the class, and then we're helping you. We have a very good division of online education.
Yeah.
EG online, and we have a new young, charismatic, energetic dean there. And she's been really making a big difference.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
We have been lucky that we had started to invest in that anyway.
Yes. Yes.
But we don't want to go whole hog though.
Right.
We don't want to be University of Southern New Hampshire. That's a great model for them, but
right.
We're looking to put 100,000 students online.
Right.
We're looking to what's going to provide our students. And another point to add to this, just off of a conversation I just got done having with our CIO. What's the right blend to give our students the best chance for success? Now, the second part of this is, all this assumes people have access to broadband.
Yes.
And have access to quality broadband. I've just seen a report from my CIO where we're working with the city and county, and we're identifying where the digital deserts are.
Yes.
That's in the city.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And where K through 12 students are, and then where our students are. And she's showing me these maps this morning. And also where our networks are, where the city's networks are.
Yeah.
So our strategy is to create what they call mesh networks to kind of be able to create free access to broadband by using wireless to connect our fiber, our infrastructure, and that apparently build up some essentially relay posts. The signals across so to cover. So we figure there not only for our students, but there's probably on average 25% of the Guilford County schools K through 12 students who have low or no access to broadband. So so just saying it's going online, everybody assumes that you're like you and me. You're sitting at home with your computer, with Zoom, with a big monitor, with all of that.
Also just with a quiet, safe place to study too, you know what I mean? Like, as opposed to, like, depending on what your home life is like,
Absolutely. A lot of our students have, not a lot, some have toxic home lives. Some have hectic home lives. Some
Yeah.
were not home or asked to take care of, add on more duties like
Yeah.
child care for their younger siblings
Yep.
and so on that
Yeah.
they have when they're at school. Some
Yeah.
of our students have aged out of the foster system, so they literally don't have a home.
Right.
The campus is home for them. And I think for
Yeah.
a non-trivial number of our students, campus is home.
Yeah.
They come from a small town,
Yeah.
you
I'll
know.
even speak, from my own experience as an undergrad. I came from a pretty, privileged area on Long Island, but I didn't have an easy childhood. And then having the opportunity to I got a scholarship to go away to Florida and just reset my life. And
Right.
it was transformative. And I would imagine that, there will always need to be some kind of blend to kind of meet the very varied needs of the student population you're trying to reach, particularly those who are most in need. We've talked about digital inclusion is one of the themes that we talked a lot about on the show, and it's just hard. It's harder now where you can't be shoulder to shoulder with someone,
Yeah.
helping them get comfortable with the technology. They're out there on their own unless they are physically in the same space as you. So yeah, it's obviously some complexity that you're navigating out there.
Well, it is, they didn't teach me this in Chancellor School, or else I was absent on that day, how to manage a pandemic and social unrest simultaneously. I think I
Yeah.
might have missed those lectures.
Yeah.
That might have been me and Julio down in the schoolyard when lesson what's going on. But so we're trying the best we can to navigate this.
Yeah.
The problem is that not only is it sort of novel for us, but it's so fluid.
Yeah.
I was talking to one of my board members earlier today about some decisions we needed to make. And
Yeah.
just from 3 weeks ago, where we had
Yeah.
the original started the discussion to now,
Yeah.
is all different.
Right.
So all
What's
the stuff that held in doesn't hold now.
Yeah, what's interesting about what you seem to have developed there, though, is that there is that sense of longer term vision. So that even if you're dealing with the tumult and the churn in the now, where thinking about a strategic plan in 2020 is kind of absurd because year one is shot, and then where are you going to go year 2, 3, 5? But at least you do have sort of the North Star, if you will, of opening up access and, delivering on the mission that you were describing, really being there for these students whose lives can be transformed by their educational experience. That in some ways makes it easier to deal with the exigencies of right now, where what's aligned with our mission now to help these students who are dealing with the unrest, or what's aligned to our mission around dealing with these families who are really struggling with COVID and the response and all that. So I know we're coming close to time, but I'd love to get some thoughts from you on, what's working and how do you continue to communicate. I guess what I see from you is you're putting yourself out there, you're maybe sharing like lessons in leadership, because it does seem like you have to be able to almost share your vulnerability about some of this stuff too,
It's interesting that you say that, because I don't know if you saw the message that I wrote to the campus.
Yes.
But as I wrote, it was personal. I mean, I experienced that in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
I have a son who's, as I said, 22.
Yeah.
Who had been, after I wrote that, in the midweek, stopped and followed by the police all the way to his house.
Wow. Yeah.
And then turned around when he went in the driveway, came back and flashed lights on him and said something to him.
Yeah.
So it's very personal to me, as it is, I think, particularly for many Black men.
Yeah.
But then I told the Chancellor's Council, I told them why I was emotional about this. And I was surprised when several people did say they appreciated me expressing vulnerability.
Yeah.
On this, and I was telling them, you need to understand the Black people who work for you are going through it, are going through something.
Yes.
My mother told me a story when I was 5 years old, got in a fight with a kid in Canada. The mother called she might have been the original Karen. She called the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and
Wow.
when the Mountie showed up on my doorstep, I guess
Wow.
looking for this 5-year-old who was a public threat.
God.
You know, and
In the full Mountie costume too,
I
like.
have to ask my mom if they came in the red jackets and the hats and everything. But it brings up all kinds of stuff for people, and they've
I'm
got.
sure.
So I was talking to them about how to think about this, and I was also talking to them. A lot of people were asking, well, what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
Particularly white people. What can we do? What can we do?
Right. Right.
And I wish I could say what I really said, but I think we're on a public broadcast, so I don't can't. But I said, do blank something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny.
Something.
Yeah.
Do something. So I wanted to answer. One of the things we found out during this pandemic was that we have a number of our students are food insecure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we have a Spartan Open Pantry, and I mentioned it in my thing. And turns out 50% of the students who use that are Black.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so wife and I just decided, we went to Costco, loaded up 2 SUVs, and took it over there.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not rewriting the Civil Rights Act of 1964,
Mm-hmm.
but it's helping somebody.
Right. Yeah.
There's people to be able to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Food. I told this to him. I said, food.
Yeah.
Allen Iverson, when he said practice,
Oh my God.
I said, food. We're talking about food here.
Oh my God. Well, you had me with Iverson. I mean, that's a whole nother.
Well, that was our mistake. Practice. You're asking me to practice.
Yeah.
But it was that tone. We're talking about something fundamental.
Food. Yeah. Well, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like if you don't feel safe, you don't have food, you don't have clothes on your back, all the loftier aspirations of higher education don't mean anything.
Don't mean anything. And
yeah.
so the point is, do something.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever your thing is.
Yeah.
Whatever you're good at, whatever you feel.
Yeah.
You have skill at that you can lend, or.
Yeah.
Is it mentoring and creating networks? Is it being an anti-racist?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's been a real distinction we've learned in this.
Yes.
There's a difference between being a racist and being an anti-racist.
Yeah.
You say, well, I'm not racist.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of my friends say that. But I'm an anti-racist.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you preventing conversations from happening?
Mm-hmm.
When you hear it among people? Are you calling people when they're invoking race, when you're talking about promotions for folks?
Yeah. And it's because I keep coming back. Yeah, I keep coming back to like, can you get comfortable being uncomfortable talking about race? Because you're not going to get it right. Like you're going to feel, especially as a whole white fragility is another book that I just started, but like trying to understand where, as a white person, you will feel more like your defense mechanisms are triggered in your own ways, and like just try to work through that and realize that we all come with baggage based on our lived experiences, but like being able to own that you're uncomfortable about this stuff, but you still are not avoiding it. Hopefully the time for avoidance stays away. Like I'm concerned that we're not going to have the appetite.
Well, we're not
to stay on this. Yeah.
We're not, but you got to kind of lurch it forward. You said a phrase that I've been using actually in response to COVID with my staff. You all are going to have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because the school year is not going to go, universities are interesting, right? They are very, I don't know if regimented is the right word, but routinized is probably.
Mm-hmm.
Move. We talked about move-in, there's a move-in.
Yeah.
Big hoopla around the beginning of the school year.
And
all sorts of events, this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
Then classes start, then the break. And so people my biggest thing when I got here, I'd ask, why are we doing that? And they say, we're doing it that way because we always did it that way.
Yeah.
We're not, that's not going to be a good enough answer.
Yeah.
Now with COVID, it's really not, because we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We can't predict anybody. Predict anything.
Yeah.
Doesn't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're going to have to be uncomfortable. I'm going to have to be
Hmm.
uncomfortable with
Yeah.
being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And when you start to talk about race,
Hmm.
white people are going to have to experience discomfort if they want progress.
Right.
I think what white people see now is black people experience discomfort every day.
Exactly. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, just in everyday lived life. To this day, I can
Hmm.
tell you something that has happened to me almost every day.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. We're coming up close to time. I always like to ask my guests what trends are capturing their imagination outside of what we just talked about. And it may also be reinforcing what we just talked about if that's really all that's kind of occupying your mind. But longer term, looking ahead into the 2030s, 20 through the 2020s,
Yeah.
what kind of trends do you see out there that are capturing your imagination?
That's an interesting question because I've been trying to tell the university community, particularly donors, board members, senior staff, that we've got to. The goal isn't to get back to the pre-COVID world.
Right.
We've got to somehow leapfrog.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
for us as an institution in particular to get ahead, what can we do? So we are working on as you say, digital inclusion.
Hmm.
People say, used to believe that we conquered the digital divide. I remember
Right.
the conversation happening
Hmm.
15, 20 years ago.
Hmm.
You haven't heard much about it since, but now
Right. Right.
we start to see the upside of things like Zoom and other
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
telework platforms. It's clear that that's going to be incorporated, not as much as people think, but
Yeah.
still, I think companies are going to find that, hey, I don't need bringing my sales force from all over the
Yeah.
country. It costs too much. Or
Hmm.
boards. I'm on several boards where we've had virtual meetings, and I think, you don't get the having a cocktail at the bar kind of
Exactly. Yeah.
thing. Instead of having 4 meetings or 3 meetings a year, you maybe have one and have the others
Yeah. Remote. Yeah.
remote.
Hmm.
So, so this whole digital access, broadband inclusion
Hmm.
is one trend. I think that one of the most interesting things, and I've always thought about it, and I think the Tulsa incident brought it about,
Hmm.
is around Black access to capital.
Mm. Mm.
You know,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
hearing some discussions about various folks trying to rebuild Black Wall Street. There's one.
Yeah.
There was one in Durham, North Carolina, around
Mm.
North Carolina Life, which I think was the biggest Black insurance company uh,
Okay.
in the country
Yeah.
from the 19th century.
Hmm.
So I think that's going to be. I think that's going to be a trend.
Hmm.
Very curious to see how long this interest in race as a intellectual project,
Yes.
because I cracked up when I think it's my Netflix when it popped up, the home page pops up and the top row was Black films, all these. i just I just thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen, and so I guess if you want to learn, if you want to
Yeah.
learn on Blacks in film, you could. So I'm
Yeah.
curious about how that trend will
Yeah.
will play out. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm interested in in how this all plays out politically, the
Hmm.
protests and the demonstrations and the like.
Yes.
The biggest, I think, takeaway, uh, particularly from COVID, but also from the protests, is around the concepts of structure, systemic, and institutional. I
Hmm.
think for progressive racial advocates, the most difficult task has been trying to get people to understand what that means.
Yeah.
Bring me some
Yeah.
institutional racism. I can't touch it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
show me George Floyd. I can touch it. I can see it.
Yes.
But so I think COVID, for example, has exposed the systemic biases in the healthcare system.
Hmm.
Now,
Yep.
it's a pattern is a pattern.
Yeah.
Do a pattern,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Right.
And it's interesting that Native Americans and Blacks have the highest proportional death rates,
Right. Right.
and
Yeah.
Hispanics aren't that far behind.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're a political scientist, so like we need more people with that. Like, what base level of understanding of the influence of society and these institutions on how we understand ourselves and our lives? Not everybody even has that baseline working knowledge, you know?
Like we're talking about access to food,
Right.
access to healthcare.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not saying
Yeah.
I have access to being a hedge fund manager.
Right. Right. Yeah. Just
I,
base level. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
food and
Yeah.
health.
Yeah. Yeah. Some deep stuff.
That's so we're looking, just to end. We're talking. We started this racial equity initiative,
Mm-hmm.
and so the question became: do you attack it the way university would? You set up a task force and you set up these committees and you do
Yeah.
that, which is our natural response,
Sure.
or do you say we're going to solve three problems? So if it's food insecurity or whatever,
Yep.
I don't know what the problems are.
I see.
We're going to solve it through the organization,
Mm-hmm.
right? Microaggression, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to have metrics and we're going to have outcomes, and everybody's going to have to do it. And so we're thinking about how we approach this.
Yeah.
And we'll see how accountable people are going to be. I'm very curious to see whether these protests end up in anything in terms of political action.
Yeah. Agreed.
It's going to be a turnout election, and I'm thrilled. I can't begin. I was a longtime commentator on one of the TV stations in LA when I was a dean. I could speak my mind on politics then. I can't
now you're the chancellor. Yeah, exactly.
right now, but we've been positing some interesting hypotheses about what will happen about mid-October.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness.
That's going to be the telling point on everything, I think. So
yeah, well, we had an amazing conversation here. I'd love to have you back on. It sounds like there's plenty more for us to talk about. This is Dr. Franklin D. Gilliam Jr., the Chancellor of the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate having you on the show.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and to our listeners, we'll be back again soon on Trending in Education.